so pleased to have you on the program. You've been on our show before, and a lot has been discussed about Trump's cabinet positions. To me, it's all a bunch of nonsense. Trump certainly has a lot of appointments to make, and he's going to tap on people in his campaign who are competent and who helped get him elected. So we're not really going to talk about that. But what is the big topic that a lot of media outlets aren't talking about is Trump's conflicts of interest. He has a major business going on while he's trying to be the next president. How have presidents in the past dealt with this? And they've been talking about a blind trust. Give our audience some indication. How does a blind trust work, and would it work for Donald Trump?
To begin with, King, Donald Trump is completely different from anyone else that has ever been elected. We're talking about a hard-driving businessman with investments all over the world and high-profile investments. So Donald Trump is really in a class by himself when it comes to this conflict of interest issue. Now, as far as blind trusts go, in our firm, we deal with a lot of very wealthy clients where blind trusts and other vehicles are used to maintain integrity. So exceptionally wealthy families do this all the time. And when you're talking about now the President of the United States, these conflict of interest issues are really going to be a centerpiece of where people are going to attack him. And let's talk specifically about what a blind trust is. When you have a blind trust, the assets of the person are put into a trust, and a trustee is named that has full discretion over those assets. Now, here's the key as it pertains to politics. That trustee must be completely independent, absolutely no relationship at all to the owner of the trust. And essentially the reason that it's called a blind trust is because the owner of the trust is supposed to be, in effect, blind and not actually know what's going on in the trust, what assets are in the trust, what decisions are being made within the trust. Now, since Lyndon Johnson, presidents have been doing this because of these conflict of interest rules, except for Obama, because his assets were simply held in index funds and treasury notes. So it wasn't really looked at that a blind trust would be necessary for him because of the nature of his assets. So that's how blind trusts work. Now, here's the interesting part, King, is that presidents are not required to have blind trusts. Presidents publicly disclose their assets and their business interests, and obviously when Donald Trump made his disclosures, it was a massive amount of information that was submitted, but it's not required by the government. So it really creates an interesting scenario because he doesn't have to do it.
And who determines the blind trust, right? You said it's supposed to be I don't know anybody who's impartial anywhere. Does a judge determine who the blind trust is? How does that work? I'm a little confused on that part.
Well, here's how it goes. So presidents are not legally required to have a blind trust. And the reason for that is because going way back when they started to look at these issues, they did not want to have successful people be precluded from being president. So this is exactly the scenario that they were thinking of back then. I don't know if they imagined someone like Donald Trump, but this is the scenario. So here's what we have, and how's this for an oxymoron, King? You have the Office of Government Ethics, okay, that's supposed to monitor these types of conflicts. But because the president is excluded from this, you would say, we have this backup plan of the Office of Government Ethics. But here's the catch. The president makes the appointment as to who heads up the Office of Government Ethics. So no matter what happens here with Donald Trump, you're going to have Donald Trump appointing someone to oversee the ethics aspect of the things he does. So decisions he makes as president, as the president, how does that impact his business interests? So he can do that. The question is, the Government Ethics Office is going to take a look and say, well, was there self-dealing here? It is going to be enormously difficult, to track this. Donald Trump has investments all over the world. Every decision he makes as president, as it pertains to foreign policy, is probably going to have some impact, or could have some impact, on his business interests. So we are really in uncharted waters here with Donald Trump.
And if you're just tuning in, it's Dan Geltrude's segment, Dollars and Cents, and we're so thrilled that Dan has made the time to be with us every Saturday morning from 7:45 a.m. to 8 a.m. on WIBG radio. We're talking about the potential conflicts of interest involving Donald Trump's business. I mean, why wouldn't it just be suitable enough for his children to run the company, which is, I assume, what happened during the campaign, while, Trump can just focus on running the country?
Well, it's a great point. Now, I go back to the Office of Government Ethics. The Office of Government Ethics actually forbids family members from overseeing the blind trust. So initially, Donald Trump had said, you know what, I'm going to put all of my assets into a blind trust, and I'm going to have my children oversee it. Well, the Office of Government Ethics doesn't allow this. So now you have Trump saying, well, my children are just going to run my company, which he's certainly permitted to do. But again, you look at it and say, he's obviously close with his children. He has his children. The perception, or maybe the reality, is that they are deeply involved with the decisions he's going to be making related to cabinet posts, policy. He talked about his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, being involved in trying to broker a deal between the Palestinians and Israel. So this whole thing is getting mixed up, and it's hard to tell, well, what is a Trump business interest and what is a Trump organization interest? And as far as his children go, King, he has said, you've elected me president, you have the trust in me, you know the assets that I have. So with all those things, you can't assume that I was going to give all that up, all this wealth that I've built up over my lifetime. So I'm going to have my children run the business. I'm going to run the country, and the two are not going to intersect, and you just have to trust me. And I believe there will be a portion of the population that will trust him because they elected him for the very reasons that I just outlined. However, there's almost half the population that did not and will not perhaps support Donald Trump going forward. So these conflict of interest issues are really going to be a thorn in his side. Knowing Donald Trump, he'll probably ignore them and just move forward.
CPA national media superstar Dan Geltrude is with us here. We're talking about the potential conflicts of interest involving Donald Trump and him being president and having a very successful company. Couldn't he just sell his company and the assets to his children? Is that legal, Dan?
Well, that's a great point, King. So, yes, he could sell his assets off to his children. The result of that would be as follows. Donald Trump would become very liquid because he would have, cash investments, let's say. So that would be really, really easy to put that into a blind trust and have someone independently manage it. However, the reason that's not going to happen is twofold. First, in order for Donald Trump's children to, in effect, buy him out, they would have to take on an enormous amount of debt to pay their father. So that simply is impractical. Now, the other side of it is, ultimately, I would assume that Donald Trump's estate plan is to leave his business empire to his children. And here's where the first conflict comes up. So Trump has talked about he's going to get rid of the estate tax. So all these billions of dollars that he's accumulated in assets are going to pass down to his children without any taxes. And immediately people are going to jump on that and say, well, wait a minute. He wanted to change that tax rule for his personal benefit so that he could pass on that wealth tax-free to his children. So these are the types of problems that we are going to have continually during a Trump presidency.
What is the solution? If Donald Trump gave you a call right after our segment, Dan, and said, Dan Geltrude, you're an expert in these sort of matters, and I'm sure Donald has advisors in this field, I would hope. But just in case he calls you, Dan, what would you advise Donald Trump to do here?
Well, if I was available and, as you said, not on this show, I would probably take the call, King. So if he gets me on the phone and says, Dan, what do I do? I would say to him, well, President-elect Trump, you seem to have a real situation here, and you probably should put your assets into the blind trust and appoint someone independently to manage all of those assets and go down that road, because otherwise his presidency is going to be tainted by these conflicts. However, I doubt that Donald Trump is going to take that advice. So if you ask me what do I think he will do, I think Trump will take the position that he has made all the proper disclosures. People know he's rich, and they don't care, and they're going to trust him to do the right thing. As president, Donald Trump is going to continue to have to make financial disclosures related to his investments. So I believe in his mind, he's going to say everything is above board. Everything is out in the open. There's nothing to hide. So I'm clearly not going to do anything wrong because everybody sees it. But, there's kind of another little wrinkle in this, King, and that is much of Donald Trump's asset value pertains to his brand. And that creates another wrinkle that we haven't seen with anybody who has been elected president. Because if the value of his assets are in his brand, in his name, how do you manage that? How do you put your brand in a blind trust, particularly when the brand is his name? So, and again, the blind trust, the point of it is that the owner of the trust is supposed to be blind. So unless Donald Trump gets amnesia, even a blind trust, and what my recommendation would be to him to try to offset some of these conflicts, still will not work, because Donald Trump is not going to forget who he is and his brand and where all his assets are located. So this problem is going to be sticking around for quite some time, and I think it's great, King, that you brought up these issues, because it's going to be in the news more and more and more, and your listeners are kind of getting a head start on what's going to be coming down the road.
I'm absolutely thrilled. You will be here every Saturday morning at 7:45 a.m. And as we discussed previously, usually they do the document dump Friday afternoons, and we will have a lot of interesting and new topics to talk about in relating to dollars and cents, where you are an expert. You were on a Los Angeles radio station yesterday, so we're so happy and pleased to have you here, right here in Southern New Jersey as well. Dan, you're a great addition to this team, and we really appreciate you getting up early with us on a Saturday.
Thank you, King. I'm thrilled to be with you. So thanks.